Behind me is a building which has united many minorities in the East End since its construction. It is currently a mosque, but was previously a synagogue, and before that was also a French church. This is the only building in the United Kingdom to have housed all three Abrahamic faiths. Originally, this building was constructed by Protestant French Huguenots who were fleeing persecution by Catholic France. It was first built in 1743 and served as a place of refuge for these Huguenots as they assimilated into British culture. The building shifted from a Protestant church to a Methodist chapel in 1819 as the Huguenots emigrated from Brick Lane. As the Jewish population in the East End grew, the building was converted into a synagogue in 1898 and remained so until the 1970s. The Jewish population sought residence in other places in London, in part to escape the targeted bombings of the area during World War II, and also in part because of their economic success and subsequent affluence. This left room for the Bangladeshis to come and take up residence in Brick Lane since it became more affordable thanks to the Jewish community's efforts. The building was officially converted into a mosque in 1976, which served as a communal building of faith which strengthened the sense of community among the Bangladeshis. The Bangladeshi community has unfortunately suffered targeted attacks since their immigration in the 1960s, and although the intent of the attackers was to threaten the Bangladesh community, this only served to strengthen the people against systematic racism and brought the Bangladeshis closer together. Brick Lane has served as a spot of worship and community and a safe haven for those looked down on, and no other building exemplifies this idea than the Brick Lane Mosque.
This is the Nazrul, one of the oldest and most famous restaurants in Brick Lane. This Indian restaurant has been around since the 1950s. Back then, the restaurant, which is more like a cafe, mostly served Bangladeshi men. As time went on, the scope of the Nazrul's customer base grew. In the early 1970s, members of the Quaker community became regulars at the establishment. The restaurant was named after Qazi Nazrul Islam. Islam was a famous Bengali poet and songwriter. His works included many nationalist poems and devotional works to Hindu gods. The restaurant was popular in the 1950s because it provided halal food for the Bangladeshi and Pakistani migrant workers. Many of these workers were Islamic. In Islamic faith, halal food is food that is permitted through the Quran. The Quran outlines that food is supposed to nourish and sustain. Some examples of halal food are sheep, goats, cattle, and camels. However, these meats have to be specially prepared and dedicated to Allah, the Islamic God, before they are considered halal. Racism has affected the Islamic and Bengali community in London since the 1960s. These restaurants provided and maintained the safe space created in Bangletown for the brown community. However, gentrification has affected many of the restaurants on Brick Lane, which is slowly deteriorating this safe space. In the last 15 years, the number of curry restaurants in Brick Lane has decreased by 62%. This is partly due to the increasing rent prices caused by the City of London's financial district, which borders Brick Lane. One reason for the increase in racism towards the Brick Lane community is misrepresentation. Monica Ali's book, Brick Lane, was famous for its context inside the lives of Bengali people. However, when the book was trying to be filmed, protests and demonstrations led by local traders and businessmen erupted across Brick Lane. Among many problematic lines, the one that sparked the most anger was of a scene which depicted lice falling into a pot of curry in a Brick Lane restaurant. This was a huge disservice to the people of Brick Lane, who wanted to be accurately and ethically portrayed. Midnight curfews, enforced by the Tower Hamlets Council, is another issue affecting the restaurants in Brick Lane. Restaurants are not allowed to take orders past 11 p.m. In a place where late-night meals are one of the only things keeping restaurants afloat, these laws have had massive impacts on the restaurants in the area. Asmal Hussain, who owns 4 restaurants on Brick Lane, predicted that 30% of the restaurants will be gone in 3 months. Please consider visiting the Nazrul to have a meal after your tour is over. Not only will your meal sustain you, it will help sustain London's unique and historical curry capital.